Aloha, and welcome back to Wanderous. I'm your host, Andrew Crusoe, and I have a story to share with you today. Now, for the context of this story, we have to go back. We have to go back when we were young and innocent. We have to go back to the year of 2014. That's right, 2014, when I visited the beautiful island of Maui. I visited Maui and ended up making many new friends in the process. And one of the amazing friends that I made was Garrett Lisi. Now, you may have heard of Garrett Lisi. He did an incredible TED Talk years ago about finding a universal theory that would connect all four of the major forces in the universe. All of this connects to my visit to France, which is what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to Wanderous. This is a show designed to inspire you to travel, to go outside your comfort zone, and to show you how travel can be an incredible force of personal growth and inspiration in your life. It's been a total game changer for me. Let's do it. So we've set our mind back to the beautiful island of Maui. And I had wanted to go for a long time. I won't tell the entire story of that. I hint at some of that story in my book, 10,000 Hours in Paradise, in the events of the third and final volume of that trilogy. But I already had a friend on Maui. I knew a wonderful woman named Roxanne Darling, who did one of the first video podcasts that ever happened. It was called Beach Walks with Rox. I'll put that in the show description. Really inspiring short form video show where she would walk around the Maui beaches with her dog Lexi and sort of share these little insights and questions to chew on, philosophical things. And it was, of course, buoyed by the beautiful Hawaiian landscape behind her, of course. So I finally made it to Maui after being on Hawaii for a year and a half. It was right before I moved away the first time, and I decided I have to visit Maui. And I stayed with this guy that I met when I did the Vipassana course. It's a whole story. The point of this story is that one of the people I got to meet on Maui was Garrett Lisi, who is an incredible person, a theoretical physicist. And I messaged him. I might even have messaged him on Twitter back when Twitter was useful. And he actually invited me over to his house. He has a Pacific Science Institute where he lets physicists and thinkers, he basically has a think tank on his property where people who are doing good research can stay for free. It's a very exciting thing that he's doing over there. And we had lunch and I actually interviewed him. It was the very first, it might have been the very first interview I did as a podcast that I released. And I didn't really know what I was doing, to be honest. It was totally spur of the moment, and I actually recorded it on my phone, and I still have the same phone. So that tells you how much I need to get a new iPhone. But I recorded it on my iPhone's built-in microphone, so not the best quality. But nonetheless, he was an excellent guest, and we just had an amazing, wide-ranging conversation about the future of energy, about the future of physics. If we could actually figure out a unifying theory that would tie all four of the major forces together. We talked about investing as well. What a brilliant guy. I was really refreshed to spend an afternoon with him. I really appreciated it. And one of the things we talked about 10 years ago, almost exactly 10 years ago as I'm recording this, was ITER, which is the acronym ITER, but in French it sounds a little bit different, of course. And it stands for, or stood for, they don't really go by the acronym as much, but it'll help you understand what its original purpose was. It stood for the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, which is an amazing international collaborative project to create sustainable fusion power. So when I shared that I was traveling around the world, Garrett reached out to me, or we had some texting conversation. He said, hey, if you go to France, you should check out ITER. And I look it up, and it looks amazing. It looks it looks like science fiction. Maybe even something that I could put in a future novel. If you know much about my work, you know that my first novel, The Truth Beyond the Sky, actually predicted gravity waves before they were proven by LIGO, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Observer. I might be getting the second word wrong, but LIGO And these gravity waves are actually important to the plot. So I love seeing where fiction and reality meet and often inspire each other, often can be even synergistic in some ways. So I did loads of research and I found out that Iter is in a vaguely difficult spot to reach in terms of public transportation. It's in a place called Cadarache, which is north of Marseille. But this was a big reason why I went down to Marseille. Also, I wanted to see the Mediterranean Sea. You got to see the Mediterranean Sea and the incredible hiking, which I'll talk about in other episodes. But Iter was really my aim here. And about 6 or 7 months before, I went to the website and I was able to reserve a tour, which was free. And you can do this too. If you go to France, and I'll put the link in the show notes, you can always go to patreon.com/Hello Crusoe. That's patreon.com/Hello, Crusoe, like Robinson Crusoe. Pause for laugh. Hello Crusoe is my username on pretty much everything. So if you go to patreon.com/Hello Crusoe, you can follow for free. You don't have to donate any money. There are people who donate to support this work, and it means a lot to me. And every Wednesday, they get behind the scenes photos, and they get access to it's like 21 hours of audiobook content from audiobooks that I've made about my travels and even science fiction. So it's definitely worth checking out, but that's where you'll see the show notes for this episode. So this show right now, as of recording, this will probably change, but is only published on Patreon, but it also gets zipped over to Spotify because there's a really convenient Spotify integration. I do recommend that you subscribe to me on Spotify because people often forget to check Patreon, but people are on Spotify a lot more, and that's also totally free. You can listen to this show anywhere that Spotify works in your life. That's really cool, I think. So the link to the Spotify subscription is also at patreon.com/Hello Crusoe. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a comment. I really try to shape this show in response to what people think about it, what people want to hear, the questions that people want to ask. I have loads and loads of experience and often crazy mishap stories around all my travels, and I don't always realize what people want to know. So you can always ask me, how do I get to places? How do I save a lot of money when I'm traveling around? How do I find the best deals? How do I find out where to go? How do I connect with people? You can ask me any of these questions. I really want to know what you're interested in. I'm sharing my story here, attempting to be as chronological as possible. At the time of this recording, I've been traveling nomadically for over 2 years, spending much less than I would staying in one place in America. And I just want to be helpful in this, and I want to grow this show. I want to grow the Patreon. Even if you don't join as a monetary supporter, just following for free means a lot, and leaving a comment and telling me what you enjoyed or what you didn't enjoy means a lot. So thank you. Now back to the story. That's called a commercial inside of a show. That's not really a commercial because we don't have sponsors. This is a community-sponsored podcast unless someone really wows me with a deal. So I finally get down to Marseille, and I have an Airbnb, and I'm staying with this lovely woman who is she owns a language consultant company teaching French companies essentially English. And I start this exploration of Marseille, and this is all building up to getting up to Cadarache, which is about an hour and a half drive from where I was. But first, I decided to explore a beautiful piece of architecture that someone in Scotland told me about. And we're going to get back to Iter later on. But when I was in Scotland, I stayed with the architect. You might remember, people have been listening to the show for a while. They might remember that I stayed with an architect in Glasgow, and she told me about Corbusier. Now, they just call him Le Corbusier. And he was a completely game-changing architect, a modernist architect who designed housing units all around the world. And the most famous example of what he designed is this thing that looks like it's from Star Wars called, and I will probably murder the pronunciation of this, Unité d'habitation, which basically means the unit that you can inhabit, or housing unit. And it's this amazing, I'm trying to find the exact. So I took a tour of this place, and something like over 800 people can live in this thing. So of course, traditionally people would build skyscrapers, right? It's not an incredible amount of personality. I walked to this thing because I wasn't that far. I was staying in South Marseille, and I walked past these towering like white hills. The formations along the Mediterranean are quite striking. And I finally made it to this stone monolith, vaguely, that had a spiral stone staircase along the side, but it wasn't quite a monolith. And I was able to just explore in sort of a self-guided tour, and I started wandering the multicolored halls. So every floor sort of had a different color scheme. So I have one floor here that's very yellow and orange. And I'm going to try to do this justice because it was really colorful and really cool. There was a library inside, but one of the best things about Unité d'habitation is the view. Okay, so this building, I'm going to double check because there are several of these, but I think it was about it's like 6, 7, 8, 9 stories. It was pretty tall, and I'm looking forward to sharing the photos of this because there are really some haunting, these sort of like gold lights illuminating the halls, because I think lights were turned off for the most part, but there were these emergency lights that were on, and I think that they do their best to have it be as environmentally sustainable and thoughtful as possible. And some of these, the way the light was catching the floors in this place were quite striking and quite interesting. But what I didn't realize when I got to the roof of this place was that the roof of Unité d'habitation, which you can visit for free, is also a gallery of sorts. So there was a art installation on the roof. Then the roof is quite large as well. You can just walk around and explore, and there's a gymnasium up there. There's even like competitions they have. So I'm up there enjoying, like, I can see the bay, and I can see all of these tan-roofed, low houses in the distance, and I can see along the main boulevard, the what's it called? Boulevard de Michelet, very important boulevard in Marseille, lined with very, very tall, beautiful trees. They really thought it through in terms of the urban design of Marseille. They try. And I was very pleased. Of course, to the south, I see the Calanques, the hills that hug, basically fjords that hug the edge of the Mediterranean Sea. Can't quite see the little coves, but I can see the little bays where you can still see the Mediterranean, of course, from the view. A crazy beautiful view. A wonderful mixture of these deciduous trees, oaks, and all these things. And mostly white, pale buildings, probably because it can get really, really, it's a very sunny place. And even these photos I'm looking at now, there was not a cloud in the sky. All of these, the best of these photos, which are very striking I love this one. You can see this sedimentary, layers of this entire hill is just a sedimentary monument. These will be also at Patreon for supporters. I release the best of each episode, the photos from each episode every Wednesday to supporters that support $10 a month, which is a very nice collaborative thing that we're doing. So I'm poking around and I'm enjoying this really just enjoyable, beautiful building. And I get to the top, and there is a DeLorean. There is a small copper, not that small, I don't know, 1.5 meters, copper DeLorean art installation with the wing doors up. And for some reason, there are like quartz crystals inside of it as well. It says 1981 on the license plate. And there are also Greek statues in the same style. So there's kind of some haunting Aphrodite-esque Greek statues. And with the perfect blue, utterly cloudless blue sky behind it. It really set up some good opportunities for photos. So it was really pretty. I really recommend it. If you get to Marseille, go to Unité d'habitation. It's remarkable. You can go down to the ground floor, and they have books you can look at about the history, and there are even some things. I don't know. I'm trying to remember if there was an English book. I don't think there was, but you can sort of figure out some of the words are close, and you can see some of the photos of them building in, and just this thing is a monument. It's massive. It is easily the coolest building, probably the coolest building in Marseille, with, in my opinion, of course, probably tied with Notre Dame de la Garde, which is the cathedral they have on the hill, which is the tallest point in Marseille. There's a hill which I would visit later, which had an amazing view. This cathedral is dedicated to all the sailors because, of course, Marseille is a very important port, especially historically. And I was really surprised when reviewing the photos because I don't have the best memory. I got a pretty bad concussion 5 years ago, which I think affected my memory. There's a whole episode of a previous podcast about that. So my memory is not the best. And when I was reviewing all the photos from this, I was very surprised to see how much I did that day. I ended up walking through Borelli Park, which has these canals that go, into the sea. These wonderful lined canals of all these trees and things. There was a lot of green space in Marseille. Some of the green space needs to be manicured a bit, at least when I was there, but it's very pretty. And I found myself in the other cool things that I really recommend is if you get to Marseille, try to go down. There is a boulevard. You find Borelli Park, which is the Marseille Marina. Look up the Marseille Marina, right? There is a road that goes along. It's near Prophète, a plage. Plage means beach. Plage du Prophète, right? The Prophet Beach. I'm guessing Prophète means prophet. There's this boulevard that goes right along. Actually, they don't call it a boulevard. There's this road. They call it a corniche. It's right on the coast. It just falls into the Mediterranean. And the way they built this is super, super, super cool. It's one of the longest benches in the world at the time. And it's this single curving bench that follows the road. And you can walk along it. It's just a long, long sidewalk. And they have these little stairwells carved in. You can go down, and there's some secrets. There's ancient stuff down here. There's weird little doors. There's some graffiti, but it's artistic and not too distracting. I'm gonna put some of this in the bonus as well for Wednesday. It's really fascinating to see just the way that this rock formation just falls off. And people like to swim along the rocks. The rocks aren't sharp like they are in Hawaii. It's fine. So I got some pictures of the waves are kind of crashing against these rocks, but it's kind of entertaining. And I kept walking along the coast, which I recommend. Whenever you go to somewhere, walk along the coast. You will be treated to some interesting things to see. And I reached this 3-arched bridge. The road I was walking along was called Corniche du Président John Fitzgerald Kennedy. They named this road after John F. Kennedy, which I thought was quite interesting. And I'm sure there's an interesting reason for that. And if anybody wants to look that up and leave something in the comments about why that is, I will give you a special bonus as long as it's in the calendar year of 2024. I can't be expected to give out historical bonuses forever, but 2024, I'll give you a special. I'll email you something nice. As long as you're following the Patreon for free, once you follow for free, then I'll have your email and I can send you something. And there were a fair amount of people just sort of sun tanning on these rocks, and it wasn't always obvious how they got down there. There's a funny photo I'll also share of just this huge gaggle of people near the three-arched bridge. In these little areas, it was really a lovely, lovely afternoon. Just walking along the edge, some little pools of trapped water. It's quite a warm day. Trapped water behind piles of rocks and things. And I believe, was this the day I took? Yeah, this is the day I took my favorite photo of Marseille. So I finally made it into the city center for the first time. And they have this area called Vieux Port. Vieux means old, and port means port. The Vieux Port, I'm please forgive my pronunciation. I'm not very good at pronouncing French yet. But the old port is the shortest ferry ride probably in France. It's 1 minute and you can go across. It's just sort of this, the Vieux Port is like this rectangle port that's probably only 100 meters across. It's pretty small. But that's where everybody, catches the ferry to the nearby Friol Islands, and where everybody, all the rich people, put their yachts, basically. I'm sort of wandering around the streets. There's all these little streets and all these little mysterious areas, and I took this photo. There was a moment where I was on. I'll try to describe this moment where I sort of got lost, and I found myself on a hill, and it was vaguely reminiscent of a hill in San Francisco, for instance. And in a city, you can lose track of the natural, flow of the land because it's been changed so drastically. But I found myself on this hill, and I look down the street, and there's nothing green. It's very. I think that's why it struck me. It was one of the very few streets that didn't have any trees. Unfortunately, my camera did not accurately record the latitude and longitude, so I do not know the name of the street, which is really a shame. But it should be somewhere near Boulevard Baille, Baille, and it reminded me of Blade Runner. It was just this photo is such a mood. It's hard to describe. Every now and again, if you're into photography, you accidentally, and I think people don't always admit this, but some of the best photos, some of them, not the majority of them, the minority of them, but some of them, you accidentally frame something that's just the right moment and the right framing, and you have this flashbulb moment. It feels like, even though this photo wasn't taken with flash, where it just gives you a real emotion, a real palpable emotion when you look at this photo. You get all the feels, and I just love this photo. I might even give it away for free in a few months, but the Patreon, because I love this photo so much. That maybe I'll put just this one for free, but I'm not sure if I will. Definitely, it'll be exclusive to Patreon supporters for a few months. Anyway, that's a very boring story about a photo. And then I made my way over to some vegan food. I went to a spot that I would quite recommend on Boulevard Baille that was called Halo, Hailo, which has vegan burgers. And the burgers are violet. I guess it's probably because there's beets in the batter. It was a very photogenic, fun photo. And that would be a continuing saga of vegan food that I would find in Marseille. If you're plant-based, you can find it. You can do it. So that was pretty much my day of just a crash course going through Marseille. Next time, I'm going to tell the story of how I accidentally ended up in the newspaper. I know I've been teasing this story for a few episodes. I thought I would get to it in this one, but I want to tell us in the next episode how I ended up in the French newspaper, and my journey finally to Iter is coming up soon, right after that. And it was really starting to flow now. I was just I really felt like I was in the present moment. I really felt grateful. And I was given I'm still very, very grateful for the opportunity that a couple of the representatives of ETEL gave me to actually do an interview for Ascendant, which is my other show, my other podcast. And I can link to that in the next episode when I talk about that interview. But I was very thankful to do that interview. So there are a lot of lovely things coming up, including some very fun explorations of hidden little bays and hidden little clanks in the south of France. So stay tuned. Thank you so much for listening. Please let me know if you have any questions. I love to hear comments. Any activity is encouraging. And I also coming up soon, I also take the ferry to the Friol Islands, which is definitely a totally new perspective of Marseille once you kind of get some distance from there. You have a different appreciation altogether. And so many adventures are coming up, and I can't wait to share them with you. And yeah, I hope you have a lovely day. I hope this was inspiring, and it's really not as difficult to get to these places as you would think. I would really like to get a sponsor someday for. I love Skyscanner to sponsor me because that's actually my favorite one right now. It could change, but you'd be surprised if you punch something into like Skyscanner or Kiwi. You might be surprised, especially if you do a flexible month, if you do a flexible departure day, how cheap it can be to get to some of these places. I think that we don't let ourselves just sort of brainstorm and go, well, what if? And I think if we did that more, we would lead more interesting lives. Once again, thank you so much for listening. I've been Andrew Crusoe. This is a sentence that people say on the radio, so I'm saying it now. I've been Andrew Crusoe, recording a podcast for you. And please let me know if you have any questions. Please let me know what you liked or what you didn't like. It's very easy to comment. I believe you can even comment if you're not following on Patreon. And once again, that's patreon.com/hello, HELLO, CRUSOE, like Robinson Crusoe. Mahalo nui loa, and I will see you next time.